Welcome to On Texas Football. Time for State of the Program. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Gerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel of On Texas Football. This episode of State of the Program brought to you by our friend Adam Lowy over at the Lowy Law Firm. CJ and Gerry, big recruiting weekend coming up for the Longhorns. There's been a new name added, a five-star out of the state of Georgia. Texas still going to Georgia for top recruits. In fact, you look at it right now, one of the things I wanted to talk about is not only the visits coming in this weekend, but there are now two guys that are set to make their decisions on Thursday and Saturday that were just at Texas this past weekend and may portend good news for the Longhorns. Dre Quinn, a defensive end out of Georgia, Buford, Georgia, was in town this past weekend. He's expected to decide now between Texas and Clemson. That will happen, we believe, sometime tomorrow afternoon. And then Vodney Cleveland, a big defensive tackle that we've talked a lot about out of Birmingham, Alabama, expected to sign between Texas, Florida, and perhaps North Carolina, as well as Alabama and Auburn. He is expected to announce on Saturday, or says he's going to announce Saturday at 3:30. Those are two big-name guys that Texas had in. Texas just recently lost. Also, though, KJ Edwards, the running back out of Carthage, who Texas was hoping to get in for an official visit this weekend, as well as offensive tackle Sam Roseborough out of Clearwater, Florida. Both those guys going to the Aggies. Let's start it off. Let's talk briefly about Quinn and Cleveland and where they might fit in this class and your latest that you have. Gerry, I'll start with you on Quinn and Cleveland.
Yeah, I think there's confidence on the Texas side on Quinn. The question around that decision is, if Clemson played the earlier guaranteed playing time type of card, could that have an influence there on Dre Quinn? Dre Quinn's taken more visits to SEC schools than anywhere else over the course of his recruitment. I do think the SEC's at play. I think he had a great unofficial visit in April and had a tremendous official visit last weekend. So I think there's probably more confidence on the Texas side than Clemson's side 24 hours before a decision.
What about Vodney Cleveland, Gerry, a young man out of Alabama? Your thoughts there?
We've been saying for a while that there was within that circle, the thought was he'd end up going out of state. And we thought it would come down to Texas and Florida in that scenario. He did make the week visit to North Carolina last week, so it's gone. Georgia does want him, by the way, as well, but they're not expected to be the pick and have gone 3 days out till decision time. But we thought it could come down to Texas and Florida, with North Carolina there as the third. And I think he had a tremendous official visit to Texas, canceled Miami visit this weekend to set up his announcement for June 21st. And again, of the schools that are in contention, I think there's more confidence on the Texas side as of this morning.
Texas at 13 commitments right now. That would be 14 and 15 if the Longhorns can domino going into a big recruiting weekend ahead. We'll talk about that. But first, CJ, your thoughts on the two young men that just chose the Aggies when they had Texas scholarship offers?
Oh, CJ got the fun part.
Yeah, how about it? I get the fun part for the folks who don't want to hear a lot of fun, right? So, look, it's part of recruiting, and things turn on a dime, right? We're talking about it Wednesday morning. Hey, Tyler Atkinson's scheduling a Texas official visit when previously we thought that the two had parted ways, gone a different direction. So, there's good and bad. There's give and take in recruiting and currently. And I know the KJ Edwards decision was maybe a little bit out of left field for us, for folks in the industry, and I think specifically for Texas. But you start looking around at what might be coming down the road, especially with this weekend. When you start talking about the defensive line, when you talk about decisions upcoming, look, there's a lot of good news on the horizon for the Longhorns, but you're going to take some bumps and bruises along the way. That's just part of recruiting in 2026, for this classification. And look, if you're not built for it, Bobby, I know you had a great article this morning. Look, if you don't trust the Texas staff by now, I don't know what to tell you.
That's where I'm at. Gerry, I know every year is different. You and I both say this all the time, but Sark, you got to admit, kind of has a feel for this thing long term over his short term or 4 or 5 year term in Austin. Now he's shown a proclivity to understand the real timing involved here. Is that something that you think is taking place a little bit again here?
I think that's the way he is, and that's the way he recruits. And we have fun with our chat saying, hey, the chats are more worried about than Steve Sarkisian is, right? In recruiting, Sark said, "Wake me up in December." And look, I had a somebody in a circle of a prospect tell me yesterday afternoon, even after these July commitments happen, it's still 6 months until they can sign.
Yep.
My thought when I got off that phone call is that's exactly what Steve Sarkisian is thinking.
All right, let's move forward, if you would, to talk about the June 20th visitors coming in this weekend. But before we do, we want to say thank you to our sponsor. That's Adam Lowy of the Lowy Law Firm. Adam and his group have been sponsoring On Texas Football for almost 2 years now. We appreciate him very much. If you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, please give Adam a shout at loweylawfirm.com. They'll give you a free, no strings attached consultation to see if you might be due compensation. That's Lowy Law Firm, Adam Lowy. Thank you so much for sponsoring On Texas Football. All right, guys, let's get to this June 20th, recruiting weekend ahead. There's been some late movement here. We've taken one guy off, added one guy in the last 2 hours, Gerry? I'll let you tell people about who we've added and who we've taken off.
Well, let's just call this 5-star weekend. I mean, this has turned into 5-star weekend. Dia Bell, congrats, Dia. You're crushing it, Elite 11 right now. 5-star, obviously. John Turntine is a 5-star for us. Jermaine Bishop is a 5-star in the industry ranking. Trenton Henderson is a 5-star in the industry ranking. Richard Wesley has some 5-star rankings. And the addition of Tyler Atkinson, who 2 weeks ago, Texas in Atkinson's circle had pretty much said, this visit's not going to happen. This is how quickly things change. Now Tyler Atkinson's coming in, and I think Texas has a lot of ground to make up, but take your swings in recruiting. Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, and Oregon all ahead of Texas entering this weekend because they've had him on campus for an official. Atkinson's been on campus twice unofficially. That is a lot of 5-star prospects. Then you look at Kendall Gerville, Valden Sohn, who Georgia's trying to get to visit instead of Texas right now. Valden's going to Florida. Is it Florida right now for a midweek? Luke Wafel, top 100 guy in the country, ranked that way. And then you see Caden Prothro is a top 50 guy in the country. This is a ton of talent that's going to be on campus this week, and that's not counting a lot of these other 4-star guys that are on this list. This is a big weekend on the edge position, especially. That probably takes center stage, honestly. Linebacker, tight end, there isn't one committed. Kiwi Brown, I think, is my favorite. CJ, my favorite recruit to talk about this weekend because his dad's Travis Brown, former UFC fighter, and his stepmom will whip your you-know-what. That's Ronda Rousey, so they're a lot of fun to talk about. Then there's one legacy, Caden Finley, son of Jermichael Finley, which I think Texas made a lot of ground up on Notre Dame. Is a pretty good spot headed in this weekend. Now the question's going to be, can Texas upset some teams and pull off one of these 5-stars on this list this weekend and really set up this class? Or are they going to get upset because they've been out in front for John Turntine for a long time? Is A&M going to upset Texas in the end? It's going to be interesting to follow.
A lot of 5-stars, as you mentioned. The one thing I would say here, and I want to pitch to CJ on this, you see the offensive names there. 5 of the 9 guys coming in on that offensive side of the ball are already committed to the Longhorns. On the defensive side, none of them committed. Could this eventually be a big deal in defensive recruiting, a big weekend for the Longhorns, CJ?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really exciting when you compare the June 13th to the June 20th official visit weekends on the defensive side of the ball. That's probably as stacked an official visit, back-to-back weekends as we've seen on the defensive side of the ball. And that's even after what I believe to be Texas's best defensive recruiting class I've covered last year. So they're going after the right guys, but it helps having, quote unquote, the face of your 2026 recruiting class, Dia Bell, on campus, right? I look back to a year ago and, these recruiting cycles kind of mirror each other after a few years with Steve Sarkisian, but you build that final official visit weekend last year with KJ Lacey on campus. Bo Barnes was in that class as well. James Simon, the Coleman brothers. You had a good base of guys already committed in that class a year ago. And of course, last year, the focus was on offense, right? It was Kalik Lockett. It was Amari Winston. It was Jamie French. It was all of these guys that you were hoping to get into the fold after the official visit weekend. This year it's on defense. So how does that help? Well, you can certainly say Texas, led by Arch Manning on the field this year. If Dia Bell is the guy that you think will be the catalyst for the offense in a few years, now you just got to figure out the defensive pieces. And with all these 5-star guys coming in on the front seven, man, it's exciting to think what that marriage might look like if they're able to join this 26 class and really stick together a really solid offensive and defensive group.
Bobby, another thing about this weekend, 9 half the visitors are out of state. You have 3 from the state of Florida, all top 100 prospects, top 75 prospects in the country, 2 5-stars. 2 from Georgia, 1 5-star and 1 on the cusp. 2 from California, one of those being a 5-star. So it's a lot of out-of-state flavor. And as to your point, Bobby, 6 of those defensive guys are out of state.
Yep. Look, I'm looking at it, and it's just an impressive list. Again, Sark and those guys, Brandon Harris, doing a phenomenal job of bringing in guys. Now they just have to domino, right? I mean, you have to get some guys in the boat. Maybe that starts tomorrow with Dre Quinn, the defensive end out of Buford, Georgia, and then keeps going with Vodney Cleveland, the big defensive tackle out of Birmingham. A couple other notes that I wanted to bring up, Gerry, you and I talked about it. Tyler Atkinson is the newcomer to this list. He's the 5-star linebacker out of Georgia. Grayson McHugh, the big offensive lineman out of Pennsylvania, is the one that has dropped off this list there in the last 2 hours or so for us. A couple other news and notes that I think are important to discuss here. Dia Bell's performance at the Elite 11 at this point through the Tuesday night workout. I saw one service had him as the top quarterback there so far. Another one had him in the top 3. Another one had him in number 2 overall. The consensus seems to be he's a top 3 quarterback in this class. People asked and mentioned this. Oh, well, Texas is getting beat on skill position players on offense right now. And my thought whenever they lost KJ Edwards, right? My thought is, well, wait a minute. They got a top 3 quarterback in the country committed. They're not losing out on skill position players from that standpoint. So, Gerry, I want to ask you this. What is your take on Dia Bell? I know you're not a big believer in the Elite 11 as the be-all, end-all. And I don't even think the people at the Elite 11 think it's the be-all, end-all. They think it's a piece of the pie, too. You think – did you expect Dia Bell to go out there and be in this category of the top 2 or 3 guys in the conversation at quarterback?
Yes, because he's wired the right way. And yes, he's got the footwork. And by the way, he got very lucky with his injury last year in the playoffs. Very lucky. And he's back to 100% now. It took him a while. And when I spoke with Raja Bell that day, I was at American Heritage in May. He said he's getting his reactive quickness with his feet, or the last piece to that, and they've started to come back because he was just off a long time after that injury. And he got very lucky again. But, yeah, he's wired the right way for it. I really believe that. Look, and your dad's a long-time pro athlete. And those guys are brought up, and they're wired the right way. And that's the one thing about Dia. And, by the way, his body's physically maturing. He was 6'2.5", about 215, 213, 215 when I was there. He's gained probably 12 pounds and grown almost half an inch since I was there a year ago. But I just think he's wired the right way, Bobby. And he takes he hasn't rested, and he wouldn't. Raja Bell's kid's not going to do this. He hasn't rested on having NIL deals in high school, being the Gatorade Player of the Year. And it's probably part of it is probably because it all flashed before their eyes with that playoff injury in high school. And you said, wow, that kind of has a way of saying we're really lucky where we're at here. And I think that fuels him even more. I think that fuels Dia even more. And I love that he answers the bell. That's one of the things. It was hard to even get down to see him because he was like, well, I've got training at this time with my quarterback coach. So we've had to work out. That's somebody who's always doing something, working on their craft. And the way he's wired is the reason he's as successful as he is. And I think that shows on a football field when the walls close in as much duress as he plays under that national schedule. You don't see a guy that's playing panicked ever. You just see a guy that's out there trying to make plays. That's wired the right way.
CJ, I look at this group right now and what's going on at Texas, not just with Diabell, but the entire group. They've already gotten several receivers. Chris Stewart, one of those guys coming in, had taken a visit to Tennessee over the weekend, but his dad actually came on Coffee and Football yesterday morning and said, hey, Chris is 100% committed to Tennessee. Jermaine Bishop already committed. Cohen Brown, the wide receiver out of Waxahachie. You look at this group of offensive players, they're waiting on a couple of offensive linemen. You and Jeff talked about this. John Turntine coming in this weekend. They also have Zayden Crippen that's been on campus already. Felix Ojo expected to go. Is offensive line recruiting in a good shape right now, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think so. And this even comes on the heels of a decision of Sam Roseborough to commit to Texas A&M. Look, tough decisions are made on the recruit side. Tough decisions are made on the coaching side as well. Does that mean Texas picked one or the other? Look, I think that tough decisions were made, right? So for Texas, I think Zayden Crippen had a great visit. Felix Ojo had a good visit. Now it's up to John Turntine for this upcoming weekend. And the one thing that still kind of stood out to me is, when does Michigan become a big threat? Because they're in on all three of them. And if you include Malachi Lee, they're in on all four of the Texas outstanding targets that are uncommitted at the moment. So keeping an eye there. But look, if those are the four that you're coming down to fill out your class, you've figured it out, right? Those are three really, really good offensive linemen, and then one that I think is otherworldly in John Turntine. So I think Texas has a great base with Nick Robertson and Max Wright, and I've mentioned a strong base on the defensive side of the ball after that June 6th official visit weekend. Now you can shoot for the stars and really fill out that the trench offensive line and defensive line classes for 2026. All in all, offensive line with the guys that they're targeting right now, even with a Grayson McKee not coming in anymore, I think this is a really special class loading in 26.
Gerry and CJ, before we get going here on this state of the program, I have one more piece of thing I want to drop here in this state of the program. Before I do that, I want to say thanks again to our friend Adam Lowy over at the Lowy Law Firm. Again, if you've been injured in a car wreck, truck wreck, automobile accident of any kind, make sure you give Adam and his group a shout at loweylawfirm.com. That's loweylawfirm.com. They'll give you a free, no strings attached consultation to see if you might be due compensation. All right. This is something that the University of Texas football team posted. Look at this. A little tease of guys working out this morning. There's Parker Livingstone going at it. You guys notice anybody in here that y'all are interested in getting after it a little bit?
Well, one of those first slides, DJ Campbell, year 4 for him. We've expected, that jump year after year. Could this be the year that vaults him into that day 2 conversation? We're hoping so. It's a money year for him. But, Gerry, we saw him walking across the street not too long ago. It's the best he's looked physically since he's been here.
It's the best he's looked since high school. And he's stronger now. But when I say that, he played offensive and defensive line and basketball, and he was always like in tip-top shape in high school. And then I think he got to college, gained some weight. But to CJ's point, he looks as close to he did at his high school with more strength added over years than he has since he's been at Texas. He looks really good.
All right. We're ready for it. We are 73 days away from Texas taking the field against Ohio State. That'll do it for this week's state of the program. For CJ Vogel, for Gerry Hamilton, as well as our producer, Matt Hutchin, I'm Bobby Burton. You guys have a good one. Big weekend ahead. A big couple of days ahead with the Longhorns, with Dre Quinn's announcement tomorrow, the big defensive end out of Buford, Georgia, as well as Vodney Cleveland defensive tackles pledge potentially on Saturday afternoon as well. For Gerry and CJ, as well as Matt, I'm Bobby. Hook 'em horns.